The smallest group has been a group of two, me and the other model.
My green light goes out. Here we are again, recording with Jason of the Golden Pose. Talk a little bit more about what it's like to be a nude art model.
Well, I had such a great time the last time we went ahead and did this. I'm just happy to go ahead and be here again.
Yeah, and we're eating while we're talking.
Pork belly's delicious.
Pork belly. Try a shrimp.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I will try a shrimp.
I love pork belly.
Me too.
It's like the meat French fry of the world. What was the first thing that can come to your mind that you thought, or what's the first thing that comes to your mind where you think, oh, I should have talked about this?
You know, it's so hard because as I was going back and listening to all three installments, you know, so many different things kind of came into my mind and I wasn't really writing them down at the time. Oh, geez, where to start? Well, one of the things that I think, and I had touched upon it, is working for, and I'm so thankful that the cold has finally gotten out of my chest, working for drawing groups as opposed to working for universities. And it's funny because when I first started out, I would have counseled any prospective art model, hey, you might have better luck at a college or a university, just because they have to be a bit more diverse in terms of who they hire. The work is usually pretty steady. And I said I'd worked for Georgetown, I had worked for the old Corcoran before they merged with GW.
Right.
Was absolutely phenomenal to work for. I loved working for them.
And the Corcoran in the old days, it was, when you went in, was like a proper art studio. Big light rooms and easels everywhere and the smell of linseed oil.
It was in an old schoolhouse, and the building had to have been at least 100 years old. And I only really went on the second floor because they had different academic disciplines used other parts. Like I think computer-aided design and things like that were on the top floor. One room was always freezing cold for some reason. But you're right. Charcoal dust all over the place.
Yeah.
Track lighting. Easels. Your traditional, like what you would think of an art studio. That's what it was. I remember one of the things that I loved about Georgetown was they had in the studio a actual dressing room for the art model, as opposed to typically you get dressed in the bathroom or something like that, and then sometimes have to wander the halls for a bit in a bathrobe and flip-flops.
Wow.
Yes.
So what was the dressing room like?
Very small. It's almost the size of like a really small broom closet, but it had a chair. There was room to...
Was it kind of like was an actual room or sort of some fake walls partitioned up?
Yeah, fake walls partitioned up. I believe they went all the way to the ceiling. But it was nice just because you didn't have to schlep through the halls wearing a bathrobe. So no, I worked for Catholic University. They were great to work for. But what I'm getting at is, and it was Catholic that I first had this experience with, Initially I reached out to the model coordinator. She did the interview. She gave me the various W-2s to fill out and things like that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, out of the blue one day, I get an email from their HR department that says, yeah, we need you to come in and fill some forms and do this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, I never had to do that for, any of the other schools.
Yeah.
So I went down to Catholic University. They had me fill out some more forms. They had me watch videos. And when I say watch videos, there was one on sexual harassment, and there was one on handling student records. And I wanted to tell them, they were very nice people, do you just out of curiosity know what it is that I'm doing for the school?
Yeah. So they had no idea. They thought you were maybe a teacher or
more like it was because of the bureaucracy. Okay, we understand you're a square peg, but there's a round hole you have to fit into, so we're just going to take this mallet and we're going to whack away at it. That was in, I want to say, 2013. And I noticed shortly thereafter, every time I dealt with a college or a university, their HR department got more and more entwined. What they did when the pandemic struck is Georgetown basically, and I don't know why they did this. I don't want to say they fired their models, but because there was because the school was shut down, I think they said, okay, we're taking everybody off of the books. You have to reapply.
Yeah, reapply.
And I just realized when they wanted me to come back, I'm like, I'm not coming out there to fill out an I-9. My citizenship status does not matter for something like this. It was just ridiculous. Oh, wow. Thank you.
What did I order? You should try the chicken.
I will try the chicken.
Yeah, and try the beef salad.
Ooh.
And then we'll try this other thing that maybe I ordered and don't know what it is. This looks like a steamed vegetable. They're going to come back and be like, oh, sorry, that's not yours.
Well, you can have what's left. There you go. That's delicious.
Yeah, that's an insipid vegetarian thing.
They, so yeah, the HR...
Well, you have to be legal.
Well, and it's one of those things I complain, I maybe hyperbolize a bit, but I'm like, okay, this is just a little extreme with all these things that you want me to go ahead and come in and fill out. And I said, you know what,
This makes you feel healthy. It's not, but...
That I just decided, Nowadays, that's delicious.
Yeah. Beef, mint, sugar.
That's good. These days, I would counsel an art model. And another thing, and this happened at GW after they merged with the Corcoran. It seemed like every semester, it was a crapshoot as to whether or not your name was still on the books.
Oh, I see.
Right, and there were like countless, there were like about 2 or 3 times where, well, you know, we need you to send in a resume and we need you to go do a background check. And I'm like, I've already done it. Do you not keep records? And it just to the point where it was just so unprofessional, honestly. And I don't mind putting GW out there too, because it's I remember one time one of the models emailed the administrative office and CC'd all the other models, which, kind of the Samson option. Yeah. But I think at that point he was just so pissed off with what was going on there that he had said something like, hey, you know, we're models, we work for a living, you're making it difficult.
Yeah.
So I would counsel anyone who's looking to model now, do a Google search and try to find some local art groups. You know, because one of the things is when you model for a place.
This was not ours, but I already ate one.
You already ate?
Yeah. But it was not ours.
Where it's not uncommon when you work one session somewhere that somebody else can approach you during a break and say, hey, are you available? This actually happened to me, oddly enough, at the old Corcoran. It was a continuing education class. So they weren't students, they were older, generally, you know, middle-aged to older people. And after I put on my robe after the first set of poses, this woman comes up.
Wait, these are the artists or the students?
I guess you would...
Or whatever.
Probably artists / students, because it's continuing education.
Okay.
So, one of the artists / students came up to me during a break, right after I finished putting up my robe.
Yeah.
Said, like, you know, you held some great poses. And I honestly thought, geez, I kind of felt like some of these poses were uninspired. Thank you. She's like, yeah, it's hard to find a model who can sit or stand still. Would you like to come to model for some of my art classes that I do? And sure enough, so it's one gig can lead to others.
Yeah. Do you have a business card?
You know, I do not, and it's one of those things I kick myself not doing, because I could have easily gone to like Vistaprint and ordered some, and it kills me because I know there's a couple of times where I bump into someone, like a professor I hadn't seen for ages.
Yeah.
And it would be in the hallways, like, oh, Jason, I'm so sorry, you know, I mean, you know, I'd love to book you again and whatever. And I'm like, if I had a card to give him or her, it might help stick out. Or there was another time where I was working for the Corcoran's free summer Saturdays at their gallery, which is across, it was catty corner to the White House. And what they did was, it was a clothed gig.
Yeah.
And what they do is they would waive the admission on these Saturdays just to get the general public in. And what they would do is they would have you model for in a podium in the atrium of, or in the foyer, I should say, of the the gallery, which the closest I can think of, have you been to the National Gallery of Art anytime recently? You remember how when you walk in the main gate...
It's a very impressive looking building.
Yes. Imagine modeling in right when you come in.
In an atrium.
Yes.
Marble.
And they had a chorale going. So the sound of the singers would reverberate.
Angels singing on high.
Yes.
Marble pilasters.
It was amazing. So what I'm getting at is a lot of people would come to draw. You know, they'd be complete novices who like, oh, this is cool. Like, you know, a lot of kids especially. But you'd have like other people who were, you know, veteran artists. But hey, you get to draw for a free model. You know, who can beat that? So there was a couple there, and they wanted me to, or at least I presume it was a couple, and they wanted me to, after my session ended, I bumped into them. They said, "Would love to have you model for us," and I had brain freeze. I gave them my email address, but the first part was from an old Hotmail account, and then the other part was from like my Gmail. So I'm like,
you are having...
Yes, all I had to do was give them a business card that said, you know, and no, unfortunately, so no, I need to go do that.
Yeah. I think Vistaprint does them free.
They do, there's a paid option. I just need to get a decent drawing or painting of me, a portrait, that I can use to go ahead and put on the card.
I don't really think you do.
I just I'd like to do it. I mean,
that's a nice thing to like, but it's more important not to lose a contact.
Well, no, that is true. That is true. So yeah, that's one of the things that I would counsel. It's like, you know, drawing groups are just, and you know, when you model for a bit and you're reliable, you're punctual, you know, you're not a weirdo, your name does get around, and then you know you will eventually. In fact, Setsuno Oko, Yoko Ono's sister, I met her because I was doing something for the Corcoran.
Right.
And for that class was when the professor said, "Hey, there's a woman who would like to hire you for, you know, a private session."
Yeah.
And you know, I can't broker that one way or the other. I just want to let you know because she may ask you during class.
Yeah. But now, talk about the difference for people who don't know. What is like an art group?
An art group, it's usually either, well, it could be, a lot of times they're drawing groups, but you know, you're not strictly limited to drawing, I don't think, where they will meet anywhere from once a week to a couple times a week, and generally it's open drawing. So what they'll do is anybody can come. You don't have to be registered for a class or anything, and you pay a nominal fee, which goes to the model. And typically it's about 3 hours, and sometimes usually what they'll do is they'll have like their, I guess, style guide, for lack of a better word, of like how they like the 3 hours to run in terms of like gesture poses versus medium-sized poses, medium-length poses, longer poses.
Yeah.
Like there used to be one that was literally the DuPont drawing group.
Right.
And it was held in the, I think they call it like a rectory. Up in the attic of the church. It was an actual fully kitted out apartment. The couple who ran it lived there, but they had it was almost like a second living room that they used to hold their drawing groups. So they meet fairly regularly. Generally, I found once you make a good impression with them, you will consistently get work.
Yeah.
You know, may not be as frequent as you would like.
Right.
Because initially and this is a kind of a misconception, just because you work either for a drawing group or an art school, they're not drawing from the model 24/7. It could be much more limited. I remember when David Quammen counseled, he called it, I think, shameless self-promotion, which I agree with. But when I was doing that, I would finally, as I was getting more and more work, I realized, just because it's an art school doesn't mean they're working from the live model 5 days a week. It could be a class that only uses the model once or twice. So yeah, you will get work.
So they only have maybe a nude model or a live person once a week or once every 2 weeks.
Possibly.
And the rest of the time, or every once a month, and maybe the rest of the time when they meet, they're drawing some apples in a cone.
Yeah, like still life, or they're doing, they're working on fundamentals, things like that, or maybe it's more lecture. The one thing that I will say is kind of nice about working for an art school or like a more academic environment is because it's a class, you're still getting paid when they break and the instructor goes ahead and goes over techniques and things like that, or they critique other people's artwork, so that's kind of nice.
Because you're getting paid for the time you're there.
Exactly. Plus, you get to learn something too.
Yeah.
You know, and I can't. You know, I can barely draw stick figures, but it's so neat to learn these art concepts that I'm like, gee.
So how many art models do you think are artists?
They do exist. I want to say, usually people go one way or the other. They're either an artist or they're a model. I do know a friend of mine. I met him at a drawing group, and he's an artist. And I think he was retiring. And so he and I would talk on the breaks.
Retiring from his day job.
His day job, yeah. I think he was a federal contractor or had a job with the feds. So, but he's an artist. And he said, you know, I'm always just, you know, once I retire, I'm going to have free time. I'd almost kind of like to model. So what I did was, I asked, you know, I said, like, where do you live? And he said he lived further out in Virginia. And I'm like, well, that's great. Because they have an art institute. It was like the Art Institute of Washington out by Dulles.
Oh.
And they just seem to have a hard time getting models just because they're out of the way. And I said, well, hey, since you live by there, drop my name, because they're giving me gigs all the time and I have to turn them down because I can't get there. But for you, that would be perfect. And so he sent me a nice thank you email and said, hey, you know, I appreciate that. Next, you know, if I see you at the, you know, at this drawing group again, I'll come draw you. I've been friends with him for years now. So he is someone who
both an artist and a model.
Right. I would say part of the reason I continue to be a model is because I love the art world, but I know I can't draw, so this lets me contribute.
You can't draw a stick bird.
Yeah, I can't. And it's funny too, because I would tell this to certain professors, like, oh no, anybody can draw with a certain amount of, you know, instruction. I'm like, I don't think you haven't had to work with me. But it's amazing the amount the people who have other jobs in the industry. There was a great person I used to work for at the Corcoran. Turns out he was a comic book artist. He worked on a reboot of the old G.I. Joe comic that was in like the mid-2000s. I'm like, this is awesome, you know? All these different people. It's amazing.
Yeah. I wouldn't actually think that's surprising, because how many artists are making a living as artists?
It's tough. Not that many, or at least they would have to have either side hustles or they would have to, and I'm speculating here, unless you have a particular style or approach that is so in demand that you could command, you know, on a routine basis 4 or 5 figures or more for a work of art.
I mean, like Liberace, I think he makes a living as an artist.
Yeah, he is one of the few that I could say for certain that even if he had some other irons in the fire, that'd be because he would choose to do so, not because he has to do it because he's sweating the rent. It's tough. I think it's also a reason why a lot of these art groups meet further out, because again, studio space is cheaper. There have been several drawing groups that approached me, and I'm like, I'd love to do it, but I don't drive, and it's just I take public transportation. It's just, unfortunately, it's way too far.
You can't get way out there. That's interesting.
Every now and then you'll have someone who's willing to give you a ride.
Yeah.
Which is really touching, especially because I'm a complete stranger to them.
Yeah.
But,
That's weird. I would have just thought that all the artists would be in, art groups would all be in kind of centralized artsy places.
There's several groups that are further out in Virginia. There's one in Hyattsville. I believe there's one in Frederick. There used to be more in D.C. And then sometimes, even before COVID, sometimes these places would just transition in and out of existence. That place where you drew me, I can't remember the name of it, but I don't
that's
think
a condo building now. Or
yeah,
something.
I was gonna.
Yeah, that was hot property. M Street and something.
It was in an up and coming area. Like there's already.
Yeah, it was near like First and M or something, which is now like really hot property. So, yeah. I had no idea there were so many art groups outside the centralized city parts. And then I guess I just assume everybody is a city person, or that they would be connected or around areas where there'd be artists.
Well, there was a person I met at and it's let me segue into the next subject. There was somebody I met at a group modeling event, and I was talking with him, and he lived somewhere in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
It was central Pennsylvania, but like, I don't think, maybe it was like south central Pennsylvania. And I remember he happened to mention he rides a motorcycle. But what he said was he travels all up and down the Northeast. Again, I don't know if he does it full time, although I would have to imagine he probably does full time if he's traveling around that much. But he said, "Oh yeah, I can go to places in Philadelphia. I can go to Delaware and West Virginia. I think there's some
as
places."
an artist.
Or as a model.
As a model,
Yes,
wow.
Yes. But yeah, I talked about this, I think, a little bit on our previous conversation. One of the things I wanted to talk about in more detail is working with more than one model.
Yeah.
It's very rare. I got to work with a friend of mine who's an art model at GW one time, and it was really neat because it was like, hey, you're working with a friend. It's one of those things you're like, if you're from the outside, it seems like, oh my God, how could you do that? But I'm like, no, it's just, it's neither one of us.
I mean, because you can be friends, but that's still...
Well, exactly, you're going to be nude in front of them, even if it's not where you're, like, we weren't facing one another, we're not, like, looking at each other when we're getting our robes back on.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that, again, sounds like nightmare fuel for some people. But for us, it was just like, we would go out in the hall and chat on breaks while the professor was giving instruction to the students. The first one I did, there was at, it's out in, not Frederick, Rockville. I can't remember the name of the Viz Arts. I met a professor who at the Art Institute of Washington at Roslyn, who was impressed, who I guess I made an impression with when I modeled for a class he was in, said, hey, I run a couple groups up in Rockville, I'd love to use you sometime. Right. So we did. And there was one, and it was a couple of group modeling sessions. So it's kind of interesting because you think, okay, this is something like most people couldn't imagine being nude in front of a bunch of strangers
and then in
by
front
themselves. Now to do it with one or more people in addition to
But it's not just the element of being nude, it's separate from that. It's the element of working with somebody that you don't, where are we going to move the same way, or, having just working with somebody that someone else.
Well, it is, and it's a different dynamic, and there's a couple of reasons why you don't see it a lot of times. One is, especially if it's with a school, the HR functions like, we don't want to, we don't want to go down that road. Also, you have to pay for more than one model, so that's an issue.
Wow. Yeah, double.
Some people might want to, they would either like, hey, I'm a woman, I just want to model with another woman, or, I'd rather model with a man and not a woman. That creates, again, a different dynamic where you're starting to have to...
Did they know that you knew each other?
Oh, yes, they did. They did. In fact, I think she went ahead and... I don't remember how we got the... I'll have to ask her the next time I see her how we got the gig, but we knew going in. Like, this wasn't a surprise, like, oh my goodness, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm the model. Oh, I'm the model. No, it wasn't like that. And that's one of the things, too. You don't want to ever put the model in a situation where they're working with another model and they don't know about it. Right. That's something, because I know, like, one model, if she just prefers not to work with guy models, and I don't know why, and I mean, this person's a friend of mine, so it's not like something where, like, she's biased or anything like that. I think it's just for whatever reason, that's just what works for her, which, again, I totally get. But, it's that dynamic when you're booking more than one model for the same gig that, what are their preferences? There was one time a professor was telling me during a break, I don't remember if he said it was here or it was in New York City, but at any rate, he was taking a class one time, and there was a male and a female model, and you could clearly tell, even though nothing was said, that the two knew each other and did not like each other, because when they posed, he said, even when you were drawing both of them, it's like you were drawing two separate pictures. Like, the body language in and of itself was just not, was isolating.
That'd be like photographing a divorced couple.
Exactly. So I don't know if they were having a lover's spat, or if these were just two people who just did not like each other, and for whatever reason they got booked together. So
wait, before you go on about the experience,
yes,
have you ever been in a group model where there are like 4 or 5 of you?
Oh yes, more than 4 or 5. I would say The smallest group has been a group of 2, me and the other model. Second time I worked a session, I want to say there were probably about 8 of us.
Wow.
Maybe, and I want to say it was an even split of men and women. There may have been a few more male models. I would say the smallest group has been a group of 2, me and the other model. They would put us in different poses. Sometimes, okay, one person go there, one person get on this podium, maybe 2 of you go here.
Wow.
Then they would do some group poses where, like, okay, we'll have a mixed group, we'll have a group of just the guys, we'll have a group of just the women, we'll have one big pose at the end with lots of energy to seal it off. The largest group I would say that I worked with was probably had about 15 people. So,
wow, 15.
Yes, exactly. So again, 15 people who may or may not have known everybody or even 1 or 2 of the people.
Now, when you have a group that big, how long is the sketching time?
I want to say that we did it in blasts of 10 to 15 minutes.
And how many of them?
That's a good question. We were there for a couple. Each session was about 3 or 4 hours. Or actually, no, I take that back. For both of them, there was an AM session and a PM session, and you could work both. You could work one and not the other because there was multiple models. Hey, if you had to go split early, that was cool. I want to say that there were probably anywhere from between 10 to 20 minutes. Now, I don't even know if we went 20 minutes, just because at that point, you're kind of getting up against people's individual skill levels and comfort levels in terms of being able to hold a pose. I want to say they were between 10 and 15 minutes.
But after you took a break, did you go back to the same pose?
No.
Okay.
Totally different. I think what you lacked as an artist in the ability to draw one long painting or to draw one long drawing or paint one long painting, you got, like, when is the next time we're going to get access to 10 or 20 models at the same point?
Right,
That's
so
rare.
they are doing some fast drawing.
Oh yeah, and it's just like
if they're trying to get all of the bodies in, not all the bodies, but maybe they're just trying to get the general feeling of the motion.
Exactly, and I think it's the uniqueness. Hey, when am I going to be able to do this? Now, I will say there was one time I worked a session, and it was me and it was a female model, and we got on different podiums. They were not so you could draw whoever you wanted. Well, 90% of the people, when we got on podium, moved their easels from in front of me to in front of the woman. And it was one of those ones where I wanted to say, is my underarm deodorant not cutting it? Do you...
That's so funny.
It is, and it's like one of those, I mean, it was honestly one of those ones I wanted to say something, and I just kind of figured, and trust me, I get it. As we talked about during our last podcast.
Yeah, women's bodies are just better.
Right, and there's less women out there, so
that
they're more of a commodity. This person, I believe, she was very curvy. She was a new model, so there were several different...
Yeah.
I could definitely see that, but it's like at the same time, too, it's like, yeah, y'all are kind of being obvious about this.
It's obvious,
just, yeah. like,
Yeah. I'm just really surprised that there are more male models than female models.
I wish I could explain it. I have no...
I think that's just here.
I think you're right, because I don't know, but I've read, specifically on the West Coast, like I want to say like Portland, Seattle, and a few other places, it's mostly it's a women occupied field, so like it's the men who are completely rare, and oh geez, you've got a male model finally, oh thank goodness, that was a bit of a humbling experience.
It's like being picked last in gym class.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
It's difficult, no matter how old you are, how self-confident you are, or whatever.
Fortunately, a couple people did stick around.
Yes. Well, that's too bad, because then you could have just sat down and still got paid if nobody was drawing you.
There was another time where that happened. Again, same thing. Male, female model, 2 separate podiums. They had me do gesture poses while the other woman did a long pose. Well, again, it's a female and it's a long pose. So guess who most people drew?
Yeah.
So I felt like I was just like flailing around doing these quick gesture poses for absolutely nobody.
Right.
And then when the model took a break, the artist would turn their attention to me, and I'm like, oh, now all of a sudden I'm popular. I think it's time for me to take a break too. No, I didn't do that, but that kind of would have
No, you should have.
Okay. Hey, you want to draw my back? No? Well, too bad.
Yeah. You should
Enjoy.
have been like, then now I take a break.
Yep. We, although I will say, 99% of the people that I've worked with in terms of the group, the crowd, the artist, have been really cool. You do get some people who can be a little weird, like socially awkward, and I'm not even talking like in a pervy type.
The people who are doing the drawing?
Yes.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Like there was one time I was working and I was doing multi-length poses throughout the session. Mm-hmm. And I forget the precipitating event, but I had mentioned like, okay, I'll do like, some of this, take a 10-minute break, and then I'll do these. And I remember there was a male artist who seemed kind of like not outright rude or anything like that, but clearly was not happy with this.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, that kind of seems like it's kind of a long break. So 2 of the female artists next to him said, the break's not for you, it's for the model. Kind of putting him in his place.
Yeah, exactly.
And then one of them turned around the conversation and said, so how do you determine how long you take your break for this and that? So I did that, and the guy chirped up again. It's like, well, I like 5-minute breaks. And I felt like saying, okay, I'll tell you what. You go take off your clothes, you hop right on this podium, because I'm going to hold you to your word.
Yeah, and you go sit for...
You go hold some really dynamic poses. I'm going to time you for each of those 5. It's one of those ones, I don't think he meant to be rude, but it's like one of those...
Well, he was obviously, socially unaware.
You're right. It's like one of those, if you've ever met somebody, and I know you have, that I'm like, why are you still talking? Where's the still in the tone of voice that tells you to shut up? There's another time where, and believe me, I'm not venting, because these are just the
but these are
exceptions to the rule.
But that's kind of in anything, I think.
Oh, easily. But there was another situation, and this is kind of what I want to speak to. When you do multiple poses, like you're not doing one long pose the entire time, you have to make sure that you're moving your body around in terms of where your face and your body are facing in the room, so nobody's stuck drawing a profile of you the entire time.
All the time, yeah.
And
That's nice of you.
Right, and if you ask any model, sometimes it happens. It's like, geez, I did one pose, I did another one, and okay, I moved part of my body, but I realized I'm still facing the same direction.
Yeah.
Well, I must have done that at one point, because this person comes up to me, and he was almost like overly apologetic to the point where...
He's like, could you please?
Right, it's almost like, you ever have someone who's like overly apologetic to the point where I'm like, you're just
like,
better off
this is now
You're right. It's
irony.
Right.
Sarcasm.
Right. I went on my break, and he's like, oh, excuse me, and I wish the people the listeners at home could see my face, which of course they can't. It's like, oh, hey, are you planning on facing that direction? And then when
for the rest of the time?
No, you're right. It was like, first of all, it's because you've got a really, and he was giving me a compliment. He said, you've got a really nice, he was drawing he's like, you've really got very distinct facial features. I want to draw them. So I was like, okay, again, not trying to be a jerk, but at the same time, if I was more sarcastic, no, I'm sorry, my parole officer says I have to face this direction for the, no, it's one of those. But no, everybody's been super, the artist, or the professor rather, who I told you who drew comic book. I worked for his class once in the middle of winter at the old Corcoran Gallery, which is a very old, drafty building. Right. And he said something like, hey, we met before class. He said, hey, is this room temperature comfortable enough for you? And I said, yeah, I think it's fine. He's like, well, I got a space heater in my Jeep. I'll go run out and go get it if you ever need it. So it's like, things like that. They're like, that was real nice of you. You didn't have to.
Well, all the experiences I've had, I mean, the artists are always trying to, the person organizing is always trying to make sure that the model is comfortable, because so many other elements are uncomfortable. Oh. So the things that are controllable, like temperature, they want to get that right.
Right, to the extent that they can make you more comfortable, they want to do it. Yeah. It's funny, it's something else I thought of. There's one person I worked for, and it was a seated pose, and it was fairly comfortable. And what he did was, the studio had these big bolts of cloth, that they had various designs and patterns woven in. So he put that on for me to go sit down on. Yes. Well, you know how filthy an art studio can be.
They're disgusting.
Yes. Well, that's disgusting is putting it mildly. So I had mentioned, hey, and I do this anyways, I'm gonna fold my robe up. So if I'm doing a seated pose, I'm sitting on my robe. I'm not sitting on somebody's chair or something like that. And you could tell he was kind of not cool with it, even though my robe wasn't spilling. It was folded into a perfect square. I thought, okay, if you're the model coming in after me, do you really want my bare bum and crotch to be sitting on this for several hours?
Yeah.
I don't think you do. And have you noticed how filthy it is now? It's kind of smelly. It's one of those.
You don't want to be bare bottoming anything.
Right. That was the first, last, and only time that ever happened. Like, whenever I do a seated pose, I would immediately fold up my robe. No one has ever once said anything. In fact, when I first became a model, David Quammen had a model training group.
Oh, wow.
And he had even mentioned, I'm almost positive he had mentioned it, saying, hey, it's good for you, it's good for whoever's going to be sitting on, whatever. It's like, it's a hygienic thing, it's just something you just do.
Yeah. So he had a training class.
Yes, he did. This was where I took one of my friends. When I became a model, I was obviously, as you could tell, very enthusiastic about it. I was telling one of my friends, a former co-worker, but we weren't co-workers when I started modeling. There was clearly a glint in my eye when I was enthusiastic about talking about modeling.
Yeah,
so after about the third or fourth time we had lunch.
You're passionate about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So after about the third or fourth time, because we would meet for lunch, because she still worked fairly close to where I work. After the third or fourth time I was talking about it, she decided she wanted to go ahead and do it. So I said, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll bring you to the gallery in Georgetown. I think it's long since gone. I think after David Quammen passed away, actually he was in a VA hospital for a while, so it may have gone by the wayside before that. At any rate, in this gallery, he had in the back room a studio where he had weekly drawing sessions, but whenever there was enough of a critical mass to have a model training session, he would hold a model training session. He would get up, he'd share his wisdom, give you a lecture for about 30 minutes or so.
Yeah.
He'd give you some handouts and materials, and there would also be artists there, because the next step was, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and model in front of the group. The idea being it's a controlled, safe setting. And if you didn't want to do it, that was perfectly fine. It's just you weren't going to become a fully inducted member of the Models Guild, just because it's like, okay, it could be very tempting, I would think, to back out at the last minute if you get, like, if Georgetown hires you as a new model, you've never done it before, and at the 11th hour, I can't do it, I'm going to back out. So I get the rationale. Maybe there was a better way to do that and still achieve the same purpose. I don't know. I have my thoughts back and forth about that. At any rate, so what I said was, okay, just so you know, if you do want to become a member, you'll have to go ahead and pose. And they're very brief poses. I think it was just to get your feet wet.
Yeah.
I think the longest pose may have been 15
Kind of like going to open mic night.
Exactly.
If you want to be a stand-up comic.
Exactly. I think the longest pose they would have had you hold was 15 minutes, and I don't even think...
that's long.
And I don't even think... I can't remember. It may have even been 10 as the longest, but I think it was like, I think what you did is maybe you had 10 1-minute poses, 5 2-minute poses, and like a 5 and a 10. Just enough for you to get your feet wet, but you're not overexerting yourself. So say, hey, I'll tell you what, when it comes time when the rubber meets the road, I'll excuse myself. But so I got up to model first, because I figured, well, I was there. There were only 3 of us, me, her, and one other person. So I figured, well, I better go ahead and model anyways, just to give these people who came here, in the middle of a Saturday in Georgetown, something to drop. So she said, hey, I can go in the other room if you want to. I'm like, no, you don't have to. I do whatever you feel it's comfortable with. I dragged you into this, not really, but...
No. This is what I do.
This is what I do. This is what I told you about. I'm leading by example. So I did it. I went back they had a little walled off section. We could go get dressed. And she got on after me. And then I thought, well, what should I go ahead and do? And I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and drop. And so I did. And she was thankful to have me there.
This is also without clothing?
Yes.
The modeling?
Yes.
Okay, so there was a locked door.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't just like a gallery and then people
no,
buy
you're
a piece
not.
of
Nobody.
artwork and
it's not this. It's not this bohemian thing where everybody's traipsing around and no, it's not like that. It was done very professionally.
Yeah, it's a closed, safe space. Mm-hmm. Right, and so you did a drawing, and were you better than the stick figures that you said?
I was, and I wish I had kept them. I mean,
You didn't keep your drawing?
I can't remember what happened.
What?
No, I didn't throw it away. I did take it back home with me. I just don't remember what I did with it.
You didn't take a photo of it?
Oh, this was before. I think iPhones.
Before cell phones? I'm sorry, it was not before cell phones.
No. Well, it was before. I want to say it was like iPhone or smartphones had only been out for like a year or two prior, and the flip phone still had that potato-like quality. But I can't remember what I did with it. You would never be able to tell it's her. I mean, there's no way.
But it was better than a stick figure.
Yes.
So, see, that person told you they were right. Everybody can learn to draw.
So, and it was fun because...
it would have been creepier if you just stood there staring.
Oh, well, of course. That I would... No, I would never do that. That's voyeuristic at that point.
And that's the good thing. If you're there drawing, then you're concentrating on something.
Exactly.
So you don't really notice that they're not wearing clothes because you're, like, busy.
You're busy focusing on... And here's the thing. I went first, and so she stayed and drew me.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and draw her. And you would think, oh my God, I've known this woman for like a decade now, and I'm looking at her, and she's not wearing any clothes, and she saw me, and you know what? None of that took place. It was like, oh geez, I'm having trouble getting, I'm having trouble getting perspective, and I'm not making good use of negative space, and it was purely
you're having
technical.
Deep thoughts.
Yes. So.
Yeah. You're like, well, especially because you don't draw normally. Mm-mm. So you're like, wait, this is the first time I've drawn anything since the 3rd grade.
I blogged about that. It was a 2-parter.
Yeah.
That, that's one of those things. There's certain things that you do as a model where...
that was paying it forward.
Exactly.
That was paying it forward. That's, like a service. You're paying it forward. So that you were led by example, and then...
Right. I'm not going to be like, hey, this is the most cool... This is one of the greatest things in the world. Okay, I'm going to dip out for 15 minutes. See ya. That's...
Right.
But it's one of those things that, like... There's certain gigs that just because by their very nature, it's... I don't remember them. Not because they were bad. Just because it was just... It was your typical standard art modeling gig.
Yeah.
But there are things that, just like with the group modeling, working for famous people, that they stick with you for the rest of your life.
Right.
They do. And they're very powerful memories.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you worked for, the famous people you've worked for so far, Yoko Ono's sister, Liberace's relative. Mm-hmm. Who else?
No one that comes to mind off the top of my head, but I guarantee you there's people in those groups that are, of renown, and they're just part of the crowd.
Yeah.
So it's...
So when you worked for Yoko Ono's sister...
Yes.
Was that just for her, private?
That was just for her.
Group?
That was private.
And did she have some set poses she wanted you to do?
She did. It was collaborative. They were longer poses in the sense that I wasn't doing a lot of gesture poses. But she was super easy to work with.
But did she have like a piece of artwork she was doing and she needed a male model to do it? Or was she doing it as, here I'm going to practice or do artwork, practice my craft by, drawing from a live model?
That's what it was.
Oh, okay.
I don't think there was anything specific she had.
It wasn't like she was doing a portrait of Moses or something like that.
No.
Or man with, I don't know, chair.
Right.
Right. It wasn't like that at all.
No.
It was that she was like, I'm going to draw, and I prefer it in the privacy. I can afford it.
Right,
I prefer it in the privacy of my own home. And,
exactly.
Or studio. That's good. And did you work for her for more than once?
I worked for her 2 or 3 times.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's good. And then the other person, Liberace.
Yes. I didn't work with him directly because I worked with him. He had 2 classrooms going, so he would shuttle back and forth, and he had one of his assistants kind of proctor, so there was switching off back and forth. Yeah. That was, and this has nothing to do with Liberace. I particularly remember that one because they had me in a pose from hell. And now they did work with me to kind of, make it as comfortable as possible. But
what was it? Man picks up penny?
No, it was... I had my legs not spread. I was standing.
Okay.
In a... With like... And of course, nobody listening can see this. Maybe one leg here, one leg here. You could really feel it in your quads.
Kind of like astride.
Yes.
Okay, so you're standing astride.
With a twist.
Oh, and then with your torso twisted.
Holding my arms in certain...
Oh, with your arm. Well, that's terrible.
Yeah, that was... And I was new-ish at the time, but I was definitely I was definitely experienced by that. Trying to think. I had a decent amount of experience under my belt at that point.
Yeah. Okay.
I was still more to learn, but it was to the point where like my thighs would hurt from. It was a Friday evening gig. My thighs would ache from Saturday morning until about Thursday the next week, and this was 3 weeks in a row.
Wow. And how long were the sessions?
About 3 hours.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that is painful.
And I don't know if you know where the torpedo factory is. It's right on the water.
Yeah, I think so.
So
yeah.
I was taking
the torpedo factory for our listeners is. It is an old torpedo factory in Old Town Alexandria, but it has been used as an art studio, art space, art gallery for a long, long time.
And it's also a very decent hike to the metro station.
Yes, although there is now a free trolley from the metro that goes down to Old Town.
Which, unfortunately, it did exist at that time. It stopped operating by the time, or at least it's...
Yes, it was not convenient.
Right, like I think they stopped giving rides at like 8 o'clock and the class went to like 8:30 or something like that. Yeah. So, yeah, that was... And, of course, it was summer.
Wow, hot.
Yeah, so...
Washington, D.C., yes. 104 degrees. Even though they say, oh, it's only 99 degrees, I'm like, no, it's really like 100 and something out there. And honestly, 99 is the same thing as 100. But anyway, yeah. Oh, so you had very hot walks to and from. Yeah. It's nice. Did you go in good time so you could get a little cooled off? Or did you just stand there and pose sweating?
Oh, no. I made it a point to get there early.
Oh, okay.
Just for that reason, so I could cool off, and at least at that point. And the studio itself was very comfortable.
Yeah.
Temperature-wise.
Yeah.
That was also the time I caught somebody surreptitiously. Well, actually, I wouldn't say they were surreptitious. They were taking a picture.
Oh.
And this is something that you have to deal with. I was getting ready. I was just at the point where I was getting ready to come off my pose, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this amber light kind of,
flashing.
Like it's right. So wait a second, did somebody just take a picture? So the pose goes off. So I figured, okay, well, all right, now I need to say something. So I put my robe on. I went over in that person's direction. I'm like, I couldn't help but notice, out of the corner of my eye, I saw you take a picture of me. He's being put on the spot by a large man in a robe. In front of about 30 people. And again, I was very polite. I was very civil, but this was not like,
right.
So he's like, oh, I was just trying to take a reference photo. So I turned to the coordinator. What's the policy on reference photos?
Yeah. How's that for a cliffhanger? Find out next time about Are Photos Allowed? This has been M's Adventures in Storytelling with Jason of Jason and the Golden Pose, a nude model.